some of the most interesting things about ancient history. Why do they have pictures of giant, enormous people-looking things with like a humanoid with a tail sitting on their lap? Is this just fiction?
Yeah.
Like, why would they detail this, and how do they have a representation of the solar system?
These people left behind such detailed records and information. It's a time capsule of information on stone tablets for us today to be able to decipher, break down, and understand, and that's what we're here to do now.
If you haven't heard about the cave painting that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about human history, you're in for a shock. Researchers just found something so ancient, so unexpected, that it's forcing experts to rethink everything we know about early humans. Could this be the earliest evidence of human creativity? What does it mean for our understanding of ancient civilizations? I've dug into the details, and trust me, you're going to want to hear this. Let's get into it. Ancient animal painting.
This is a painting of a pig, and we think that this is the oldest depiction of the animal world anywhere on the planet.
If you haven't heard about the ancient cave paintings in Sulawesi that are changing everything we thought we knew about early human art, well, brace yourself. Researchers just uncovered artwork that's so old, it's forcing experts to rewrite history, and it's happening in a place no one expected. Sulawesi, Indonesia. For the longest time, we all thought cave art was a European thing, right? You know, the famous caves in France and Spain with images of bison and horses.
This site was a really special site, and it was incredibly exciting.
Well, it turns out that the real story starts way earlier and on the opposite side of the world. Welcome to Sulawesi, the new epicenter of ancient cave art. Seriously, this place is quickly becoming one of the most important sites in Southeast Asia when it comes to understanding the origins of human creativity. One of the biggest surprises came from Layang Karampuang Cave. In July 2024, researchers found a painting that's a whopping 51,200 years old. Yep, over 51,000 years old. It shows three human-like figures hanging out around a big red pig. And it's not just a random sketch. It's a full scene that almost feels like a story. The pig is huge, around 92 centimeters by 38 centimeters, and painted in dark red. The way it's all laid out suggests that early humans were not just making random marks on cave walls, but were actually telling stories. You've got to think, humans this far back were already putting together narratives. And that's not even the first mind-blowing discovery in Sulawesi. Researchers had already found another cave art in places like Liang Tedongenge, where a painting of a Sulawesi warty pig was dated to at least 45,500 years ago.
So they must have used some sort of powder.
It could have been powder dissolved in water that they put into their mouths and then sprayed out in a mist if they were good at it.
Then there's Liang Bulu Sipong 4, which also features more warty pigs, and dates back to around 43,900 years ago. So yeah, Sulawesi is quickly becoming ground zero for ancient art, and it's showing us that early humans were much more creative, and much earlier than we ever realized. Now, how do researchers figure out just how old these paintings are? They don't just make a guess based on how the art looks or the materials used. Nope. They've got some seriously high-tech methods at their disposal. One of the coolest techniques they use is laser ablation U-series imaging. Basically, they fire lasers at deposits of calcium carbonate that have built up on top of the paintings over time. These deposits act like a natural clock, allowing the researchers to get a pretty spot-on age of the artwork. It's way more accurate than trying to judge based on the style or the pigments, which can be pretty tricky. So, what does all this mean? Well, it's forcing us to rethink the origins of human art, storytelling, and creativity. We used to think this kind of thing was reserved for Europe, but now we know that the roots of art stretch much further back and much further east. Ancient rock art. The rock art hidden deep in the Amazon will make you look at history in a whole new way. I'm talking about some seriously old artwork, like ancient enough to make you question everything we thought we knew about the early humans who lived in South America. Out in a remote corner of Colombia, in a place called Serranía de la Lindosa, there's a stretch of cliffs near the Guayabero River. This area is home to one of the largest and oldest collections of rock art in South America, covering nearly 13 kilometers of cliff faces. Getting there is no easy task either. You've got to take a 2-hour drive, then go on a 4-hour hike just to reach the paintings. But once you get there, it's like stepping back in time. Now, this treasure trove of ancient art was first discovered in 2017 and 2018, but only in recent years have we really started to understand the full extent of what's been uncovered. What's so mind-blowing about these paintings is how they offer us a glimpse into the lives of the people who lived in the Amazon thousands of years ago. These paintings don't just show their everyday lives, they give us a peek into their spiritual world, their connection to the animals around them, and even creatures that roamed the earth long before anyone even thought about picking up a brush. The artwork features everything from human figures hunting to dancing, which really shows how movement and life were such an integral part of their world. But what stands out the most is the animals. You've got your classic Amazonian creatures like deer, tapirs, and jaguars, which you'd expect in an area like this. But then, there's something that's absolutely jaw-dropping. The depictions of extinct animals that these ancient artists could never have seen in real life. Think mastodons, giant sloths, paleolama, and even Ice Age horses. Some of these horses are shown with their flowing manes, and it's clear the artists had a real knack for capturing detail. These artists weren't just throwing pigments on a wall, they were working with natural materials, likely minerals like iron oxide for those rich reds. They'd smooth out the surfaces of the cliffs with fire, probably to help the colors pop and give the artwork a little extra life. It's clear they knew exactly how to make their art stand out in the environment, and that level of attention to detail is incredible. So, what do all these paintings mean? Well, that's where things get really interesting. A lot of the images show humans with their arms raised, surrounding big animals. It could be a symbol of reverence or worship, like these animals held a special place in their culture, maybe even as spiritual beings. Some of the artwork hints at hallucinogenic plants being used in rituals, possibly linked to shamanic practices or some kind of spiritual journey. Then there are these geometric shapes and handprints that might represent everyday life, or maybe they're connected to more abstract beliefs. The more researchers dive into this, the more they realize just how much complexity there is behind these images. Ancient cattle and rituals. Out in the dry, dusty landscape of Somaliland, there's a spot that pulls us back thousands of years. This place is called Lascaux, and it's about 50 kilometers from Hargeisa, the capital. You might think it's just another dusty, remote corner of the world, but it's way more than that. Lascaux translates to camel's water hole in Somali, and that tells you a lot about how important water was to the people who lived here. After all, in a place where the land is harsh and water is precious, livestock, especially camels, were everything. But what makes Lascaux so incredible isn't just the name or the landscape, it's rock art. Back in November 2002, a group of French archaeologists stumbled upon a series of caves that turned out to hold some of the best preserved rock paintings in all of Africa. These paintings aren't just old, they're ancient, dating back between 5,000 and 11,000 years. So, I'm talking about art that was created way before any of us were around. Most of the paintings are all about animals, and not just any animals, these are the creatures that were central to life back then. Cattle are front and center, and it's clear they weren't just a food source. These cows are shown decked out in ceremonial robes, almost like they were treated with the kind of respect and reverence we usually reserve for gods. This suggests that cattle were much more than livestock. They were likely tied to rituals, spiritual beliefs, or ceremonies. The fact that they are shown in such intricate ceremonial ways shows just how deep the connection between these people and their animals really was. But it's not just cows that make an appearance. Alongside the cattle, you'll see representations of dogs, giraffes, antelopes, and other wild animals that once roamed the area. It's like these paintings were telling a story about the world these people lived in, the animals they relied on, the ones they admired, and the ones they might have feared. You can almost feel the pulse of life in these paintings, a snapshot of what the world looked like thousands of years ago. The way these paintings are so well preserved makes it clear that the artists were intentional about what they were creating. They weren't just throwing a bunch of images on a wall, they were crafting something meaningful, something that would tell future generations about their world. And now, thanks to these discoveries, we have a much clearer picture of life in this part of the world long before recorded history. 30,000-year-old storybook. If you have never heard of Ubur, you are in for a treat. Hidden deep in Kakadu National Park in Australia's Northern Territory, This place is like an open-air museum, but instead of dusty glass cases, you get towering rock formations covered in some of the oldest and most incredible Aboriginal rock art on Earth. Some of these paintings might be as old as 30,000 years, which means they are older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, and older than basically anything you have ever learned about in history class. Ubir sits in the East Alligator region of Kakadu, surrounded by rugged outcrops and sweeping floodplains. If you make it to the top of the rocky escarpment, you will be rewarded with a breathtaking view of the Nadab floodplain, which stretches out as far as the eye can see. It is the kind of view that makes you stop and just take it all in. But as stunning as the landscape is, the real magic is in the rock art itself. For thousands of years, the indigenous people of this land have used Ubir's rock faces as a canvas to share their stories, pass down knowledge, and connect with their ancestors. These paintings are not just decorations. They are part of a living culture, a way to keep history alive and ensure that future generations remember the old ways. And here is the really cool part. The paintings have been layered over time. People didn't just create art and leave it. They returned again and again, adding new stories on top of the old ones, creating a visual history of thousands of years of Aboriginal life. The art at Ubir is divided into different periods, each one reflecting a shift in culture, environment, and storytelling. The oldest paintings belong to the pre-Estuarine period, which goes all the way back to around 40,000 BC. These early works are simple, mostly done in red ochre, and include handprints and animals that no longer roam Australia. Among them are depictions of now extinct creatures, including what some believe to be a Tasmanian tiger. And then there are the Mimi spirits, thin, almost ghost-like beings that Aboriginal people say were the ones who taught their ancestors how to hunt and paint. Legend has it that the Mimi were incredibly tall and could slip in and out of the rock walls like they were walking through air. Some paintings are so high up that Aboriginal lore says the Mimi must have painted them themselves. As time went on, the paintings became more complex. During the Estuarine period, which followed the last ice age, the art became more dynamic, featuring human figures in motion, animals in more detail, and one of the most famous images in all of Ubir, the rainbow serpent. This enormous snake-like being is one of the most important figures in Aboriginal mythology, said to be the creator of rivers, mountains, and even life itself. Then came the freshwater period, which brought even more refined and modern-looking artwork. This is where you see detailed depictions of the local wildlife, including fish, crocodiles, and long-necked turtles painted in beautiful shades of orange and red. The Tsotolo Hills. The Tsotolo Hills in Botswana are not just another pretty landscape. They're a living history book etched into rock. These sacred hills have long been revered by the indigenous San people, but it wasn't until 1959 that the world outside of their community got a real glimpse into the spiritual and historical importance of the site. That was when South African writer and explorer Lauren van der Post documented the area while he was traveling through the region. His vivid descriptions of the sacred space, along with his accounts of the intricate rock art scattered throughout the hills, introduced it to a global audience for the first time. Van der Post's writings got international interest, and soon researchers and archaeologists began to take notice of what he had described. By the 1970s, serious archaeological studies were underway, and that's when the full extent of the site's significance began to emerge. Excavations uncovered all sorts of treasures, stone tools, pottery, and remnants of ancient civilizations that had called the Tsotolo Hills home for tens of thousands of years. One of the most remarkable findings came from Rhino Cave, where evidence suggested that this wasn't just a place where people lived. It was also a space used for ritual and spiritual purposes. The Tsotolo Hills weren't just an ancient settlement, they were a sacred site, a place where people came to connect with something much larger than themselves. Fast forward to today, and researchers have identified over 4,500 individual paintings spread across roughly 500 different sites in the Tsotolo Hills. These paintings are like a time capsule of the past, offering a glimpse into the lives and beliefs of the people who lived there. Most of the artwork is done in red and red-orange pigments, which were likely made from natural materials like ochre. The images themselves mainly depict the wildlife that roamed the area, including giraffes, rhinos, and antelopes. White Shaman Cave. The The White Shaman Preserve in Texas is home to one of the most mind-blowing ancient rock paintings ever found. The White Shaman mural is not just some old doodle on a wall. It is a massive, 26-foot-long masterpiece that has been sitting out in the open for around 4,000 years, holding on to secrets that researchers are still trying to figure out. At first glance, it looks like a crazy mix of human-like figures, animals, and strange shapes all tangled together in reds, yellows, blacks, and whites. Some of the figures have feathered headdresses, some look part human, part animal, and others do not even seem to belong to this world. There are deer, snakes, and big cats, but also weird geometric symbols that might mean something way deeper. Experts believe this mural was more than just art. It was a whole story, a message about how these ancient people saw the universe. They did not think of time as a straight line like we do today. Instead, they saw it as a never-ending cycle of life, death, and rebirth. They also believed in multiple layers of existence, an upper world, the everyday world, and an underworld, all connected in ways we still do not fully understand. This painting might be their way of mapping it all out, almost like a spiritual guidebook written in pictures. For a long time, people thought these kinds of rock paintings were connected to hunting rituals, maybe even involving mescal beans, a plant that can cause hallucinations. But now, researchers like Dr. Carolyn E. Boyd have been digging deeper and believe the mural might be tied to peyote rituals, similar to the ones practiced today by the Huichol people in Mexico. If that is true, then this artwork is not just a random collection of drawings. It could be a window into some of the oldest spiritual traditions in North America. Even after years of study, no one has fully cracked the code of the White Shaman mural. Ancient Egyptian symbols. Could ancient Egyptians have made their way all the way to Australia long before modern travel was even a thing? It sounds crazy, but the mystery of the Gosford glyphs might just suggest they did. Located near Gosford in New South Wales, Australia, the Gosford glyphs are a collection of over 300 carvings etched into massive rock walls. At first glance, these symbols might just seem like random drawings, but if you take a closer look, they look just like Egyptian hieroglyphs. Yep, the same kind of symbols you'd find in ancient tombs or temples in Egypt. Among the carvings, you'll spot images of boats, chickens, owls, dogs, and even human figures. And if that wasn't enough, there's one carving that looks like Anubis, the Egyptian god of the afterlife. How's that for a strange coincidence? The really intriguing part? Experts in Egyptian hieroglyphs have actually studied these carvings, and they say some of the symbols can be translated. These aren't just random marks scratched into the rock. Some of them seem to tell a story or hold a message, maybe even an ancient one. Then there's the weathering of the carvings. Over time, moss and lichen have grown over both the surface of the rock and into the grooves of the carvings. This suggests these symbols have been here for a long time, long enough for nature to claim them. The color of the rock and the carvings themselves is almost identical, which adds weight to the idea that these could be ancient. We're talking possibly older than we thought. But here's the big question. How did they get there? Could ancient Egyptians have sailed across vast oceans, visiting Australia long before the rest of the world knew the place even existed? Some believe it's entirely possible that Egyptians were seafarers capable of such journeys. On the other hand, some skeptics think these carvings might be more recent, but if that's the case, why would someone go through all that trouble to create such elaborate symbols? And why would they mimic Egyptian styles? The Bulls of the Cave. A long time ago, in what is now southwestern France, a group of early humans decided to do something incredible. Instead of just surviving, hunting, and gathering, they picked up their tools and turned a cave into something more. They covered the walls with massive lifelike images of animals so detailed and vibrant that they still take people's breath away today. We are talking about bulls as big as trucks, elegant horses, and even a rare bear, all brought to life with nothing but natural pigments and artistic talent that was way ahead of its time. This masterpiece is now known as the Hall of Bulls, one of the most jaw-dropping examples of prehistoric art ever discovered. This ancient art gallery was hidden from the world until 1940, when a teenage boy named Marcel Ravidat and his friends stumbled upon it in the most unexpected way. Marcel was out exploring when his dog, Robot, disappeared down a hole in the ground. Trying to rescue him, Marcel and his friends climbed in after him, expecting to find nothing more than a tunnel or maybe some underground passage. What they found instead was history frozen in time. At first, they thought they had uncovered a secret passage leading to a nearby manor, but as they stepped further inside, they saw something that made them stop in their tracks. The walls around them were covered in enormous ancient paintings. Once word got out, experts rushed to the scene. Among them was Abbé Henri Brouy, a French priest and archaeologist who quickly began sketching the paintings, preserving every detail. What he and his team discovered was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Over 600 paintings sprawled across the cave walls, featuring aurochs, stags, horses, and that lone bear. One of the bulls alone stretched over 5 meters long, making it the biggest known animal painting from prehistoric times. These were not just simple stick figures scratched onto rock. The artists used a technique called twisted perspective, where the bodies of the animals were drawn from the side, but their horns faced forward, creating an illusion of depth. It was an early form of visual storytelling that gave the images an almost three-dimensional look. The materials they used were just as fascinating. There were no modern brushes, no store-bought paints, just minerals like ochre and charcoal, mixed with animal fat, or even saliva to make the pigment stick to the walls. Some paintings were made with brushes fashioned from animal hair, while others were applied by blowing pigment through hollow bones, creating a spray paint effect. Every detail showed just how much skill and creativity these early humans had. The red hands. There is a place in Argentina where people thousands of years ago left something behind that still has everyone talking. It is called Cueva de las Manos, or Cave of the Hands. And it is not just some ordinary cave. It is more like a massive outdoor canvas where ancient humans decided to show off their creativity. This place holds some of the oldest and most fascinating rock art in South America, dating back as far as 7,300 BC. That is older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, and older than a lot of things we usually call ancient. The first thing that grabs your attention is the hands. Over 2,000 handprints cover the rock walls, and they are not just randomly slapped on there. They were made by pressing a hand against the rock and then spraying pigment around it, leaving behind a perfect stencil. Most of the hands are left hands, which suggests people used their right hands to spray the pigment, likely through hollow bones, or even directly from their mouths. Some of the hands are tiny, belonging to children, while others are much larger, hinting at generations of people leaving their mark. But the artwork does not stop at hands. There are paintings of animals too, specifically guanacos, which were a major food source for these ancient people. They did not just paint static images either. Some of the scenes show movement, like hunting parties chasing down animals with bows and spears, giving us a glimpse into how they lived. Alongside these are paintings of other creatures, like rheas, felines, and even some that are harder to identify. And then there are the symbols, zigzags, spirals, and geometric shapes scattered throughout the cave, almost like they were trying to communicate something beyond just daily life. Were they maps? Spiritual symbols? No one knows for sure, but it is clear that these early artists were not just painting for fun. What is really crazy is how the art changes over time. Some of the earliest paintings are more detailed and lifelike, while later ones get more abstract, almost experimental. Layers of overlapping artwork suggest different groups of people came back to this spot over thousands of years, adding their own marks on top of what was already there. It is like an ancient time capsule of creativity built up over millennia. To create these paintings, they had to use whatever natural materials they could find. They crushed minerals to make their pigments, iron oxides for red and purple, kaolin for white, nitrogerosite for yellow, and manganese oxide for black. They mixed these with animal fat, water, or even blood to make the colors stick. The fact that they are still visible today, thousands of years later, shows just how well their methods worked. The oldest story ever painted. In southern France, there is a cave that sat untouched for tens of thousands of years, completely sealed off from the world. No humans wandering in, no animals disturbing it, nothing. A landslide blocked the entrance so perfectly that it acted like nature's own security system, keeping everything inside frozen in time. Then, in 1994, a group of researchers led by Jean-Marie Chauvet finally cracked it open and found something insane. The walls of the cave were covered in paintings, art that had been waiting in the dark for around 36,000 years. That is older than the pyramids, older than just about anything else we have ever found. The paintings inside Chauvet Cave are some of the most advanced prehistoric art ever discovered. There are over 300 individual images spread throughout the cave, showing a mix of animals that you would expect: bison, horses, deer, but also some you wouldn't. The people who painted these walls did not just focus on the animals they hunted, they went all in on predators: lions, cave bears, woolly rhinoceroses, huge dangerous animals that early humans would have feared, respected, and maybe even worshipped. They used shading to create depth, giving the animals a three-dimensional look, and they placed their paintings in spots where firelight would flicker across them, making the images seem like they were moving. If you stood in that cave with a torch thousands of years ago, you wouldn't just see a painting. You would see a hunt in action, lions on the prowl, horses galloping, mammoths looming out of the shadows. What do these cave paintings mean? Maybe they're trying to communicate to today's humans.